Hey folks, welcome into the BN Cubs podcast. I'm Brett Taylor. That is newsbreaker Michael Cerami. And we're here to talk Cubs thanks to our sponsors at Ankin Law, 312-6million, Injury Law Made Personal. Thank you, Howard and Co. And thank you all, folks, for being back. Michael and I ended up taking off the holidays. When you have a podcast that typically goes out on Thursdays and then Christmas and New Year fall on Thursday, things happen. What also happened is the Cubs didn't really do a lot in that time that sort of spurred an urgency to record, because they were doing us and you a solid, it turns out, in saving the big move for right before we record. So we get to talk about the Cubs acquiring Edward Cabrera from the Marlins, as they did this week in a trade for Owen Caissie, Cristian Hernández, and Edgardo de Leon. And that trade was broken by our very own Michael Cerami. It was a Cerami Bammy. It was the biggest Cerami Bammy.
I saw a bunch of people on Twitter.
They're going to want to hear.
I was laughing.
Yeah.
A lot of people on Twitter were dropping Cerami Whammy and Cerami Bammy. And I was like, hey, podcast listeners. So I appreciate you guys that said that.
Jeff Passan.
Yeah. Actually, I'll walk you through a little bit. So what was that? It was Wednesday morning. I'm deep in the weeds on a site issue. And I'm like, I got ChatGPT up trying to figure out how to solve this problem for the site. And I'm working through it. And all of a sudden I get a text and it says, I'm trying to think of what I can say that it says. It said Cabrera, ... Yes, that one. And I was like, what? And so I went back and forth, discerned that the trade had gone down. At that point, it had been agreed to in framework. It's still a little unclear to me how. Yeah, go on.
I'm going to add to that point. So, a couple things, and then I'll let you go. So one, it was just funny. I was writing something and I get a text from Michael that just said, start writing Cabrera now.
Oh, yeah.
and of course I know what that means. I'm like, oh shit, Michael has heard something. And so I'm going, so that was fun. But what happened, and Michael's referring to, so he breaks this thing, right? And it's out there hanging for a while before anyone else is jumping on top of it. So that's actually kind of cool, because that means Michael had it like super early. But then the more official-ish, the Cubs announced it in the evening.
Hey,
but like,
who's telling this story?
No, I'm not. No, this is just. I'm not stepping on your background stuff, but I'm providing you cover because I don't know any of the actual behind-the-scenes stuff. So if I speak out of turn, it isn't you giving up a source or divulging info, because I don't actually know. All I was going to say is there was that period of time where we're waiting for like the here are the players in it. The trade is done. That portion of it. And it does seem quite plausible, because I mentioned this to you. One of the prospects in the deal, Edgardo de Leon, was literally in the air yesterday. Mm-hmm. So it is conceivable / probable that, medical review, sure, whatever. But I think also it was just waiting to be able to literally tell one of the players.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was driving towards. Is I get the sense that, so the way that this works is, it's always, these trades are discussed, right? And then the medicals are exchanged and those things get passed by each team's medical team, the physical therapists and the trainers and the medical organization personnel. And obviously in this case, it's a little bit different because Edward Cabrera has, had significant injury history. So I think that whether it was because one of the players was on a plane, or because they were still talking about the medicals, or whether that was going to change the deal in some way, it's a little unclear. But from what I understood, and that's the way I framed my original report, was that they were finalizing it, because they were finalizing it. They're in the moment of the players. The deal had been agreed upon, but they needed to do everything else that gets it over the edge. So that's why Jeff Passan, 8 hours later, was able to drop the, hey, this is done. Because at that point, everyone had been informed, all the medicals had been cleared, so on and so forth. But I will say, as someone who doesn't break a ton of news, I try it when I can, and it's mostly just Cubs stuff. When I was crafting that tweet and had it sitting there for like a second, people are going to think this is so stupid, but I was like shaking a little bit because I was like, boy, there is a giant difference between saying the Cubs are signing Hobie Milner or Phil Maton and the Cubs are trading for Edward Cabrera when the Yankees were on the doorstep of trading for him. Everyone has been waiting for it. No one else had been talking about it that morning in relation to the Cubs. And so I'm like sitting there and I send it. And then I immediately, and I had reached out to some other people to get confirmation, and they were lukewarm on the confirmation. Like, oh, wow, you might be onto something. I've heard XYZ, or this is saying it. And so I kind of got enough clarity based on the original source which is a very good source. And, that I was able to put it out there the way that I did. I don't think, I'm probably talking out of turn a little bit here just based on, but this is how it has gone for me in the past. You hear something from someone, whether you think they're trustworthy or not is up to the vetting that you've done, and whether that information has any reason to be let out for one reason or another, leverage, negotiations, whatever, is another thing that you have to contemplate. And then you reach out to some other people to try to confirm it and get that out there. I was able to do that. So I put it out there. And then the most excruciating 30 minutes of my life, I thought it was bad for some of the other things before. No, this was way worse, because a lot of people were like, even on, like, if you go to the Reddit, the Shy Cubs Reddit, people posted it and they were like, he wouldn't destroy his entire reputation for this. I was like, wait, is that what I'm gambling? Am I gambling my entire reputation? But
so I got to say, that sentence is quite a compliment, because implied within that is that in your other news breaking, rumor mongering duties, you have crossed a threshold before yesterday that people expect that when you say something, it's happening, that it's correct.
I guess let me take you back to one of the other reasons why we didn't record the podcast 2 weeks ago, or
this
last
is good.
week.
Oh, this is good. I know what you're going to share.
Tetsuya Amai. So Amai had been obviously a long rumored Cubs free agent target, right? And behind the scenes, from a handful of sources on Wednesday, because I believe he signed Thursday, we started hearing, hey, actually the Cubs, I think, are getting involved. I think they're interested. I think that this is progressing towards them being the team that ends up signing him. And it logically, it tracks and all that. And then, because it was New Year's Eve night. Yeah. And so I go to bed at a embarrassingly early hour because my kids are exhausting. And I get a text again at 3 a.m. unrelated, and unrelated sources is what I'm getting at. That was basically saying, hey, I think the Cubs are signing Amai. I think it's happening tomorrow. I think he's going to be on his way to Chicago. I didn't respond at 3 a.m., but the next morning I started making calls, started making texts, and guess what? A lot of people started hearing the same thing. But in this circumstance, I wasn't convinced. The way people were discussing it, the way it was being framed, it wasn't enough for me to put it out there, even the way I did yesterday, even though it was, a similarly strong source. And lo and behold, they didn't sign him. The Astros did, right? And so it was curious then to try to deconstruct what was going on in retrospect, because it seems likely to me that the pure volume of people incorrect about the Cubs behind the scenes
from a variety of areas.
A variety of areas from which information can be gleaned.
Different types of sources.
I mean, it was like unanimous, to the point that I wrote up an entire article and had it ready to go. And I was like, okay, either I'll get more confirmation and I can break this and post the article, or, Jeff Passan will beat me to it or whatever. And then we'll write it up, and Cubs got a new pitcher, yada, yada, yada. And it didn't happen. So all of that was bleeding into the back of my mind when I get the Edward Cabrera text yesterday. Cause I was like, God, if I had run with that last week, I would have been blatantly wrong. And in that circumstance, I had a lot of sources. So I guess this is just like,
I'm going to give you a little bit of a defense there to your imaginary antagonists. If you had reported New Year's Eve that if you had said, because this was, as far as we knew, quite accurate, the Cubs are making serious progress on signing Tatsuya Imai. Something like, if you had said something like that, and then they didn't sign him, and nothing came out about the process, nothing, that was, say your report was the only thing that came out, you would have been right. And
I know
probably
no one cares
they would have blown you up, probably, which is unfair.
They wouldn't have cared. Yeah.
Which is unfair, because that's like, I don't know. I ask people, I'm like, just think about it logically. Like, it can be true. And in fact, we did later learn that the Cubs were right there. And I think, I don't know, we have theories of what happened.
Yeah.
I think they probably were pretty serious in the process, even though I think they were a little lukewarm on the pitcher. But
yeah, it feels like they may have been used a little bit in service of getting Imai to where he wanted to go. Actually, I don't know. But the same thing was true yesterday. I was thinking, okay, so I report this before anyone had confirmed that it was going to happen, or confirmed the way I reported it. They were finalizing a deal. I was going, okay, what happens if the medicals screw up this deal? I was like, well, technically what I said was right. They were finalizing a deal, and in the process of finalizing it, maybe it gets scuttled by the medicals. It happened with Jesus Luzardo last offseason to an extent. I mean, that was a agreed upon deal. Fortunately, enough of the big boys out there were able to confirm exactly the same thing after I had put it out there. This time, again, fortunately, most of them gave me the credit, except for, I think you've seen this now, and we were kind of laughing. ESPN sent out an alert, like a push notification, which is awesome. That reaches probably hundreds of thousands of people, if not more. And they did not say Bleacher Nation. They said the other Bleacher. And then they very graciously sent out a correction alert, which I appreciated very much. We like to think we're important, but we're smaller, maybe, in ways that people don't realize. And so that sort of publicity can be good for Bleacher Nation. And so I was glad that they were able to do that. But yeah, everyone, Ken Rosenthal immediately. I mean, listen, I'm not trying to it's nice when the big guys give credit, especially because I try my best not to just dump everything I hear out there.
Yeah.
I mean, let me even rephrase that. There's been other stories I could have broken. And I think the same goes for you, but we're not always in that mode. It's not always our place. We don't always have the right reason to do it. And so, I'm not ever stepping on toes, but if I hear credible, verifiable information about a Cubs specific move, I'm going to report on it. And I have, and increasingly, the big national rumor mongers and reporters and confirmers have been giving me credit, and that's been really nice to see. Bob Nightingale said a couple of nice things. Ken Rosenthal, John Heyman, Mark Feinsand, everybody at The Athletic. That's mostly because I think Patrick and Sahadev are just nice guys that we know, and they've always been good about crediting me. And it's just, it's nice because in reality, this is the worst case scenario. And it kind of happened with, I don't remember I think it was Milner, where I reported it. I got zero credit, and then it came out and everyone else got credit, and whatever, it happens. But here's what would suck is if I report it, it turns out to be wrong. I would have gotten all of the shame,
right? And
I got none of the credit. So I took all of the risk of reporting something early, quote unquote. But, sometimes I try to remind myself in those moments, I'm like, listen, and I mean this so endearingly, especially now that he went out of his way to credit me multiple times. Bob Nightingale has been like factually incorrect a lot of times. And that's not who I'm not aspiring to be factually incorrect, but you could just try your best. and you know what? I'm going to get something wrong eventually. I think almost everyone does.
Yeah.
100%. So maybe not Jeff Passan, maybe he's the only guy who doesn't have a ton of
he did let his Twitter get hacked and try to sell a bunch of, that was funny, but
I mean, is there anything else anyone would want to know about this? A lot of times people ask me how do you and honestly, I have this question for some other people, and it's like, what's, how do you get this information, or what's in it for the person that's sharing it? And honestly, it depends so much on where you're getting information from. And I don't have a good answer that is shareable, because what it really is I send Bitcoin to every agent and player and organizational team member, one a day. And I have supercomputers mining it. And then I go, you get to unlock this reward by sharing it. And that's how it really works. And they don't want you to know this. But I don't know. That's the gist of it. And then eventually, it was confirmed by Passan again later. And now we have a nice new shiny pitcher. And I'm excited to see what he's got. I'm actually more excited to hear you kind of talk about him and the trade itself. I don't know if you want to start one way or the other, but
well, so last thing on the sort of the nature of the trade, because this carries forward. I do find it curious, and I think you do too, that the reporting about the Yankees 2 days before the Cubs trade was of the type, in a lot of ways, I think we wrote about this, of the type you typically see as a trade has reached sort of some of those finalizing steps, the medicals, the informing players, the sort of dickering about like the last piece in the trade, that kind of thing. And it didn't happen. And you
dickering.
I'm stoked I got to use that. Yeah.
I thought you made it up.
No, it's real. Look it up, folks. But it was reminiscent, like Michael said, of last year at this time when the Cubs nearly traded for Jesus Luzardo. We later learned it was medicals that scuttled that. It's interesting. There's reporting from the Cubs side that suggests it was Luzardo's medicals. There's reporting from the Marlins side that suggests it was Caissie's medicals at the time.
I don't remember that part.
He had core surgery. I don't think we knew about it at the time. So in any case, the Phillies, of course, swooped in 2 days later, completed the trade, and Luzardo was great for them. It does make you wonder if similar situation here, maybe the Yankees and Marlins were close. Maybe there was something either very legitimate in the medicals on Cabrera that concerned them, or they saw a little something and they tried to gain an edge in the trade.
Yeah, that's what it always.
And the Cubs swooped in and they're like, well, we're comfortable with that. And we know you like Caissie, so.
I want to make two sort of related points, because this is just like the 1 millionth example of this happening. So please take this as a lesson. These trades often take a year to develop. They'll be talked about in one offseason, they'll be talked about the deadline, and they'll be executed the next offseason, which is what happened with Owen Caissie, Edward Cabrera, the Cubs, the Marlins. Obviously it was Luzardo and Owen Caissie, but
they probably talked about Cabrera last year at that same time too.
Exactly. I mean, and this happens over and over. We see this all the time. Moves that are contemplated at one transactional period are discussed, approached, and then not ultimately consummated until later. This also makes me, maybe this can be the way you transition into the return, but I'm kind of curious, obviously the Cubs had been talking to the Marlins about Edward Cabrera and probably also Sandy Alcantara at the deadline. Owen Caissie's name was like the most obvious trade chip ever for all the million reasons. How much less do you think the package was, yesterday than it would have been at the deadline? Obviously you get a whole playoff run with Cabrera and that changes things. But I wonder, it's like, would this same package have done it at the deadline? And if so, the Cubs should have done that, right? But I don't know that it would have been that package. I don't think
there's talk. So how to say, there's talk out there in the ether that
Brett hears things
that the requests at the deadline from the Marlins were significantly different than this trade. Not only
not as much as the Nationals rumors, right? Where it was.
I was going to go with that next. That the trade demands were different in quality and character and extent, pretty significantly. We had heard that about the Nationals with Mackenzie Gore specifically. We've heard what the demands were, and they were outrageous. And then we've also seen comments from Jed Hoyer that strongly implied that all of the controllable starters that they talked about at the deadline, and I think he alluded to the fact that like we know who they are. Like I think he more or less confirmed that the reporting on that was accurate, but that the prices were so outrageously high. You'll note none of them were traded at the deadline. Okay. And so I think bring that forward to now. And there's two ways to think about it. Like you said, you lost out on a big arm for a playoff run, and that has real value that's now gone from the trade. Okay. So that takes away. You also have Cabrera ending the season after the trade deadline with more elbow issues. Okay. An elbow sprain with a P, folks, is a ligament issue. It's stretching or damage or micro tears or worse of the ligament. And you know what ligament you're talking about when you talk about the elbow. And so I think that that's not insignificant and is a factor in these medical discussions, and were a factor in the price tag. Because if you step back and if you somehow could take the injury risk out of this equation, and specifically if you look at what Shane Baz netted the Rays from the Orioles, also 3 years of control, same age, same projectable upside, but he's on the other side of Tommy John and just threw 170 innings, and he got massively more than what the Cubs just gave up for Cabrera, in my view. And so I think we have to be clear-eyed about the fact that the reason most fans are looking at this trade today, Cubs fans, and saying, okay, yeah, you know what? Caissie could be a star, but that seems like a fair trade. The reason is because the price was knocked significantly down because of those two things. One, because you lost the playoff run, fine. And because that injury risk is quite real.
Yeah. I do think, though, you've made this point and a few others have as well. So I'm not trying to take credit for the novelty of it, but
no, you can give me all the credit for even the stupid stuff. It's fine.
That spinach pancakes are better than regular pancakes, as everyone knows. No, well, there's two things. One, this is, I tweeted this. I could not really contemplate a better team to take this exact sort of risk. First of all, Edward Cabrera comes with 3 years of control. That really bakes in some, extra security into if one season or another is particularly injury riddled. Okay. That's one thing. Two, the Cubs, what they're maybe lacking in impact, which, maybe is provided by Cade Horton, maybe Matthew Boyd again, maybe Justin Steele comes back, maybe Edward Cabrera, whatever. But what they're lacking in like true obvious impact, they make up for maybe more than anyone in established big league caliber starting pitching depth. Yeah. They have 6 starters that ends with Justin Steele returning as, the in the middle of the year. And then you have Colin Ray, Javier Saad, Jordan Wicks, Ben Brown, and then Jackson Wiggins. I mean, it's just an absurd amount of starting pitching. And then on top of everything, like you've mentioned before, the Cubs are going to need more pitching after 2026 as Matthew Boyd at least, and Shota Imanaga and Jameson Taillon are all free agents. Now, but here's the more important thing, and the Dodgers completely opened my eyes to this, and I hate how gamified it is, but it's so true. And it's like make 12 starts in the regular season and then make all of your playoff starts. And that's literally all that matters. It's what they did with Blake Snell and Tyler Glasnow. And Shohei. Guess what? And Shohei. And guess what? Hugely successful outcome. Like you just don't need him to. It's a different way to think about it. And I wouldn't have really, 10 years ago, we'd be like, what are you talking about? But like, I don't know. I'm evolving on the idea is like, if you can, like, you got to get to look at how impactful or, how big of an impact not having enough starters in the postseason that were like impact obvious, surefire starters was for the Cubs and the Brewers in 2025. Okay. So like, if you got Edward Cabrera and you're like, yeah, he's only going to throw 100 innings throughout the season, that sucks. Of course it sucks. You want him to throw more, but if you're the sort of team that expects to make the playoffs and otherwise has a lot of starting pitching depth, well, that's kind of a perfect scenario, right? And more importantly, he has the sort of upside that is shared by Cade Horton in the Cubs rotation. And Justin Steele has sort of shown that. I feel like, I feel like, Justin Steele, when healthy, was like a better bet to have A-, B+ performance. And Edward Cabrera is a much lower bet, but has the opportunity or the ability to be A+. Like, he can be an ace. That's the kind of pitcher he is. That doesn't mean he's going to be. I mean, we've seen plenty of guys with great stuff not be aces, but besides the point, it's just that taking that risk made sense for the Cubs in a lot of different ways, and maybe more so than a lot of other teams.
A couple things to keep in mind on that, not to argue against my own points that I've made on this topic about how you can utilize so many pitchers and want them to be in position for late in the season. I'll note the Cubs had the same extreme quality depth last year for starting pitching, and they kind of didn't use it as much as they could have. Now, we saw a lot of it because Justin Steele missed most of the season, because Shota missed half the season. But when the rubber met the road and it's September and Matthew Boyd is pretty clearly wearing down, Shota is pretty clearly not right after the hamstring thing, Steele is still out, and then Cade Horton, God bless Cade Horton, came through for so much of the season, and then he gets hurt at the perfectly wrong time. Yeah. And you look back at the season and it's like, oof, what if we offloaded one of those Matthew Boyd starts to Ben Brown? Or what if we'd actually let Jordan Wicks come up and make some starts? Or what if
Jordan Wicks should have made 6 starts in August and September? I mean,
so
anyway, it's sort of retrospect because.
And then the second thing, sorry. So that's one that I'd like to see that managed. Gosh, it's so hard to criticize Craig Counsell's pitching related decisions, because like it worked so well, and I don't blame him for the postseason situation at all.
I mean, think about how different things look if Cade Horton doesn't get hurt on the last game, second to last game.
Sure.
I mean, he would have made starts and it maybe would have been fine.
And maybe they win that Brewers series. And I think anyone would have taken an NLCS run. And that the other thing is, it's easy for us to say, as we sit here in January, if Cabrera gives you 100 innings, that's fine because X, Y, and Z. Maybe, but maybe he only gives you 100 innings because in July his elbow pops. So you can't always project when and how that's going to work. You just need to have as many as possible. And because the Cubs do have that volume already, they needed potential impact guys. And that is what Cabrera is. So let's talk a little bit about what the Cubs are getting. Because in some ways, I don't know, some of the analysis has gotten a little over its skis because of the potential. I think people see clips of him pitching and they're like, holy crap, this stuff is unbelievable. And they hear about the upside, which is genuine. It's genuine front to starter stuff. And then they go look at his stats and it's like, oh, wait, he hasn't actually like really done it yet.
Yeah.
2025 was by far his best big league season. And even it's like 15% better than league average in results.
I mean, even some Marlins fans were like, whoa, we fleeced the Cubs. It's like, all right.
Yeah. So, sorry. Someone just texting, just sources, hashtag sources. Nothing's happening. Don't worry.
Oh man.
So, keep that too in mind. There's injury risk there. There is performance related risk too with Cabrera, but I like that it's his first new organization. I think the Cubs have had success with guys like that. I think players in general often have success that who I look at, or who this made me think of. I should have written this. Darn. All right. Saved it for the podcast. It reminded me of when the Twins acquired Pablo Lopez from the Marlins. Yeah. He was a guy, similarly, that had started to kind of have some decent results with the Marlins, but people knew he could do more. People knew there was better talent. And we knew it as Cubs fans because the Cubs were targeting him a number of times. And it's almost like there's a desire to target Marlins pitchers on the belief that...
It's kind of like what you said about the Rockies pitchers.
There's just get them out of that org. With the Marlins, it's almost like they're really good at developing pitchers to the big leagues. And then... I don't know, if you want to next level them a bit and get that sort of maximum big league performance, send them elsewhere. I don't know. It's a new org now in Miami, so I don't want to, they've turned over quite a bit. But it made me think about Pablo Lopez, and then he goes to the Twins, and he does take that big step forward. And then instantly he's a guy you're like, oh man, I want him in the front two of my playoff rotation.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we're hoping is going to happen with Cabrera. And in the meantime, improves the depth, pushes out a lot of those innings that would have definitely been taken up by guys that we would hope to have repeated what they did last year, like Colin Ray or Javier Assad from 2 years ago, Ben Brown maybe taking a step forward. It just sort of softens all of that you aren't necessarily obligated for all those things to click, and a Justin Steele return to maximum, and Matthew Boyd repeating and staying healthy, and Shota bouncing back. All that is like what is the story we want to tell about the rotation. But now that they have Cabrera, it's at least like, well, okay, some of those things can go sideways.
Yeah, no, exactly. And again, I mean, for me, the biggest thing is just, I like the gamble on the upside. Frankly, I hate saying this because I think people have used this very unfairly. And so by parroting it, but in the opposite way, I might be breathing life into something that doesn't deserve to be. But it's like, I similarly liked the, attempt with Tyler Chatwood back in the day. It's like, yeah, I get it that like the floor is very low and more likely to occur with him. But it's like, but when you watch him, you're like, well, if we can fix something, how about Jake Arrieta as the opposite version of that?
Yeah.
It's like, there was a chance he was nothing. I mean, there was, but like it clicked just right with the Cubs when he came to the Cubs, and then it was Jake Arrieta, right? And then it fell off again, when he got older and his mechanics were harder to replicate with that crossbody, whatever. I'm getting down but you can see what I'm saying. It's like, I don't want to compare him to Tyler Chatwood because it's not the point. He's not all stuff and no anything else, but like, I like those sort of high upside plays. It's a more appealing, lottery ticket to scratch off with lower odds but higher payout than something with higher odds and a lower payout for me.
And in some ways, that's the only way you're going to get an ace if you don't draft and develop or IFA sign the guy, right? Like you're going to have to absorb some risk at some level and take that chance if you're going to get like otherwise you're going to sign a bunch of steady eddies, which the Cubs have been very, very good at that. And that matters. That matters. But like Michael said, at some point you got to take that chance on the upside. So
it's kind of like Colin Ray, like so serviceable last year, obviously needed. And at the end of the day, it's moderation and balance in both sort of types of pitchers, right? You need a little bit of both, but it's like, there was never a version of Colin Ray that was going to lead the Cubs rotation or make a start in the postseason in the first 3 games. And it just, I mean, am I wrong about that?
No, you're not. I'm just chuckling because I have in the can, like a post about how I think in the last month of the season or something, Colin Ray was like the best pitcher in baseball.
Yeah, sure. But I know it's not the same thing. Every time that happens for someone like that, it's like, it was 40 innings. You could go any 40 inning stretch, whatever. It's like Matt Shaw had like the best 5, like he had like a 5-week, but that's not really what happened there. Right. I mean, but you get my point. Talk to me about what the Cubs gave up. I mean, I know, we all know Owen Caissie is sort of the centerpiece. Cristian Hernández being a guy that was like, we had been waiting on forever. He was kind of like the last Jefferson Rojas the way I thought about him. And it kind of, he progressed slowly through the system. He's young and stuff, but, and then, what's his name? I'm blanking.
Edgardo de Leon.
Edgardo. Yeah. De Leon. Talk to me about what the Cubs gave up, what it means, where it's headed, prospect wise, big league wise, whatever you got.
Yeah. I'll talk about the players and then we'll talk about the big league part of it, because there's multiple angles on that we want to touch on. I think I'll start with Cristian Hernández because you mentioned, part of the curse of being a huge bonus baby IFA signing is nerd fans like us. You're on our radar like before you even sign. So like you're 15, you're promised $4 million or whatever. It was the time as largest signing bonus the Cubs had ever given out in the capped era. And the weight of expectations are therefore not only significant in size, they last a really long time. And so for Hernández, he's still progressing at an age to level and production and sort of projection trajectory that's not bad. It isn't if he'd been $100,000 signing, you'd be like, hey, keep an eye on this Hernández guy. It's kind of interesting. But instead, because he was this massive bonus and hyped too much, I think, by some outside evaluators, we're disappointed that we're disappointed, that he's only at high A at 22 and batting at a league average and playing decent but not great shortstop, getting passed, frankly, by Jefferson Rojas, who was a sort of lesser signing prospect in a class behind Hernández, in fact.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's younger. Yeah, and he passed him. Dude, Rojas. I'll hype Rojas all day. I was very
we were worried he was going to be.
I was very nervous. And so I think, actually this applies to De Leon too, so I'll keep it there. These are guys that are lottery tickets for the Marlins, talented, upside, etc., but very far away. And you want to have lots of them in your organization. You want to do a good job in international free agency and sort of the later rounds of the draft to make sure you are continuously stocked with interesting prospects like that, because there are these moments where if you want to finish off a trade like this, you've got to add. And then also future depth in your org and all these things. But what you hope is that when those trades come, you are much better at scouting your own prospects internally and projecting them than some outside org is. Not because I want Hernández and De Leon to struggle. I'm not looking to the rest of their careers to be like, oh, I hope they suck. It's just that you don't want the Cubs to have lost that potential value at not an appropriate level. Like we talked about this with the Michael Busch trade, and Cubs gave up significant talent in Zahir Hope and Jackson Ferris, and we're going to see how that plays out. Both have progressed as decent prospects, with Hope getting significant hype. You don't root for them to fail, but you do root for the Cubs to have correctly valued them.
But that's funny because you almost want them to all be good, and the players they kept to be good, as a sign of the Cubs have good players in their system.
They just constantly have good players.
It's like, I guess the point is you want to sell the stock at a high sort of thing, but it's like at a high relative to when it was. You don't want to be selling low, but if it's at a high of when you sold it and it keeps going higher, that's another, question altogether.
Yes. It's all of those things mixed together that are sometimes competing thoughts, but it's all fair. But all that said, I think it is, if one of the two of them blows up, I don't know that I'm going to be overly critical of the Cubs, especially because, I don't know, part of my reaction to that would be a continuation of their inability to sign and develop IFA prospects well over the last decade. Like if Hernández goes to the Marlins and then blows up, I'm going to be like, what were you guys doing with him the last few years after he signed, that you've correctly targeted him, but then didn't help him develop? That'll be more my concern.
That's interesting.
So that said, interesting guys, but really, Caissie is the bulk of this deal for the Marlins. He's a guy who's going to deserve runway right away from the Marlins that he was potentially not going to get with the Cubs. And, immensely powerful. The raw power is, top of the scale. He's very athletic for a big dude. He was ready to be a big league corner outfielder so that the questions that exist could be answered and or worked on. And with him, it's how much of that raw power can he translate in game? We saw that was a work in progress continuously at AAA, where one, just not making enough contact to actualize the power. That's always a potential issue with these big, strong, hard swinging dudes. And then two, directionally, a lot of Caissie's hardest contact, so sort of best contact that shows up in the non-directional stats, barrel rate and hard hit, weren't pulled fly balls. And that isn't to say that that's the only way to find offensive success, right? We see that from lots of guys, but a disproportionate amount of your success needs to come from pulled fly balls with that.
Well, and a guy like Owen Caissie should specifically be deriving a disproportionate amount of his success.
Right.
I think we might have, it's hard to butterfly wing this, but he was about to get a ton of runway in September when Tucker went down, because the Cubs seemed content to let Owen Caissie play right and Suzuki DH with Ballesteros not playing. But then he got hurt, and we didn't get to see it. And you know what I discovered in those 4 weeks or whatever it was? I was, again, a little unfair to Caissie because he wasn't there, but man, I'm much more excited about Moises Ballesteros' offensive potential than Owen Caissie's. Now, Owen could play the field. That's a huge difference. But boy, I'm very excited about Moises Ballesteros, and I'm glad the Cubs have so far been able to hang on to him. And honestly, after trading away, Hope and Caissie and Cam Smith, you got to start hanging on to some of these positional prospects. The Cubs have a lot of young talent at the big league level, but I think you got to hold on to Ballesteros at this point. Now that you've traded Caissie, and hope he develops into the sort of guy that, if he can't catch once a week or play first once a week, he's a legitimate DH that is capable of, he'll always be a different type of DH. I think a lot of people picture him, in part because of the way he looks, to be a Kyle Schwarber-esque home, but he's not really that guy. He's more of an all-around hitter. Yeah. And I love that, I love that potential for the Cubs, who otherwise, have some boom bust power in other places on the roster.
He's almost more like a Kyle Tucker than, which is funny,
right,
that style of hitter. Yeah. I think that the Marlins liked Owen Caissie anyway. So that I think that you make the trade that's available, but I do think there's probably a little bit in there that's suggestive of the Cubs not preferring Moises Ballesteros to Owen Caissie sort of in a big picture sense, but preferring that if they were going to have one of them, it's DH or right field in Caissie's case, but because Seiya would play the other, that they prefer Moises Ballesteros to be that guy in 2026. I think that that's probably true, and we're going to find out. But I want to hit on a couple other organizational implications of this deal, and then we'll talk about what the Cubs might do next, because that also is intimately tied.
Since we're already pretty long too, why don't we say both of those two guys as the transaction corner?
Sure. Got it.
Yeah.
So one thing to keep in mind, Cubs also have Kevin Alcantara. I wouldn't call this like a vote of confidence in him specifically, because again, I think the Marlins wanted Owen Caissie, but now there was,
God, I always forget about him.
Well,
and it's so stupid, but
what's interesting is if Pete Crow-Armstong had suffered an injury, then maybe Alcantara gets run and we see, but setting that aside, he's never going to replace PCA, short-term, long-term. It's not going to happen. Okay. To play in a corner spot near term, it was going to require not only multiple injuries, but also he was going to have to convince the Cubs to play him over Owen Caissie or over Moises Ballesteros, depending on how guys are coordinated. And, we saw last year that didn't happen. And so now with Caissie out of the picture, and especially as you look ahead post 2026, that path to possibly becoming a big league regular is far more open. And in fact,
he has an option this year too, which is huge,
because
he's still
now
young.
He's
only 23.
Yeah. There's a year where he can be that first call. He can be that first call. If anything happens in the outfield, or even again, potentially DH, if again, Alcantara wouldn't play DH himself, he would play in the outfield.
Suzuki, right.
That's great. I love that for him, because I think the offensive potential there is, again, different in character than some of these other guys, but no less significant. And you pair it with outfield defense and great base running.
I mean, the scouting report on him for years has been superstar potential, but high risk reward.
Yes. Tons of
high risk.
Yeah. For him, I think it's tons of swing and miss on off speed and breaking pitches. I think it's great. I think he destroys fast. I may be misremembering, but it's something to that effect. Destroys fastballs in all the ways you'd want, and then everything else really struggle. And so that would get exposed in the big leagues over a long enough trajectory. So he does have things to work on still. Okay, so that was a factor from this trade, and then the other is when you choose to trade for a controllable starting pitcher like Edward Cabrera, who will make roughly $4 million this year, as opposed to signing a higher floor type like Zach Gallen, let's say. You're doing that partly because you want to buy the upside. You want to take the chance, like we discussed earlier. But part of it also is he's going to make $4 million and Zach Allen's going to make 20. And that only matters if you actually put the difference to work on the team in payroll.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, then all you've done is effectively sold Owen Caissie for $15 million that we'll never see as fans, right? Like that's essentially the trade. So what do the Cubs do next after now securing the pitching side of things?
Yeah, well, and I'm going to lead into it, but I just want to hammer that point because it's like, if you had all the money in the world, every offseason you would go, well, let's trade as many guys as we can and sign as many new guys, because then you're replenishing and doing it on both ends. Now, it doesn't obviously ever work like that for a lot of teams, but like teams like the Dodgers sometimes do it. You know what I mean? They trade guys and sign guys, and it's like, well, there you go. So yeah, if they liked Gallen and Cabrera the same amount, and said, well, we can trade for Cabrera and sign Alex Bregman, that's understandable. But if you just go, well, he's cheaper, so let's trade our prospect away, that's a huge mistake organizationally, So setting that aside, we're going to use this to transition into our transaction corner, I believe is how you wanted me to handle that. So this week's transaction corner is brought to you by Feldco. Feldco is the home renewal experts. Bleacher Nation is proud to partner with Feldco. For almost 50 years, Feldco has been transforming Chicagoland homes with their windows, siding, doors, and roofing. Feldco is family-owned and prides themselves in delighting their customers. With products made in the U.S. and designed specifically for the Midwest, Feldco offers a perfect balance of beauty and energy efficiency. I have no voice because I was a little sick last week, and it's just I'm doing my best here.
Podcast takes it out of your voice. It does.
Oh my God.
People don't
That's
realize.
why I keep taking people watching. I keep taking sips.
My cup is like empty.
Lubricate.
And I'm like, yeah. So anyway, the transaction thing, we wanted to talk about what the Cubs do next, specifically to chat about what they could do in the outfield if they wanted to. Now that Owen Caissie has moved on, it makes things like re-signing old friend Kyle Tucker or re-signing old friend Cody Bellinger moderately more plausible, because not because Owen Caissie would have blocked those guys and now he's gone, so they're unblocked. It's just that when you're, deciding how you're going to dole out the dollars, well, we do have Caissie in house, so it's sort of like, let's look elsewhere. Well, now that's gone. Okay. And that's gone long term. And so it's worth at least thinking about, okay, how much does this change the equation for those big name free agent outfielders?
Right. And so yesterday I wrote at Bleacher Nation that in light of trading Owen Caissie, and before that as well, but it's hard to imagine this not being a position that was, that coalesced around the idea that, hey, we're probably going to trade Caissie. So even though it's not like it sprung up after he was dealt, they were already probably leaning this way, and that was part of it. But long story short, I'm told, and I've reported, that the Cubs have legitimate interest in re-signing Cody Bellinger. And so that's interesting to some extent. I wrote some of this in the article. I want to do a couple things and get your reaction, because we haven't really talked about it. One of the things is there is some nice advantages to Cody Bellinger. And one of the big ones is that he hits lefties just extremely well. Last year, especially so. Okay. That was a big deal. The Cubs have lefties at first and in center, but who struggle against lefties. And so if there's particularly tough matchups, you can have Cody Bellinger play one of those positions just for that purposes alone. You also just get, depth, quality depth at first and center field in case either of those guys get hurt, because the Cubs, have Kevin Alcantara, I guess, for center, but otherwise, who's their backup center fielder? Well, if you sign Cody Bellinger, he could play center in a pinch for a short period of time. Some other advantages is that not advantages, but like kind of perks. Is like the big story about Cody Bellinger last year was he just feasted on the short porch at Yankee Stadium. And that's not untrue. His home road splits were significant. However, last season, compared to both 2023 and 2024, he improved his strikeout rate, his walk rate. He hit the ball harder. He barreled it up more. He had more hard contact, higher average exit velocity. He had a lower BABIP in 2025 than he did in 2024 and 2023. So, and he went the opposite way more than he ever has in his career, not just in the 2 years prior. So I was kind of looking at those 3 years as one thing, the post Dodgers years of Cody Bellinger, where he is a different player, right? And he was good all 3 years, but in 2023 with the Cubs, he was like a little lucky, right? 2024, it wasn't as good. Last year, he plays at Yankee Stadium and it comes back up enough that he can opt out and expect to score a big deal. And so there is things to like about him. I just do not find him, to me, he's like, should be fourth on the list of the most impactful Cubs free agent acquisition that they can make, after, in no other order, let's just say Bregman, Bo Bichette, Kyle Tucker, right? Like each of those guys are more appealing, but it's not that I can't see the appeal of Cody Bellinger. He's also young. He's been in the Cubs organization. They've signed him twice before. I mean, there's just a lot there. And now that I'm told the Cubs are legitimately interested, I don't want to ignore that.
Yeah. And it, again, in light of the trade, in light of the history there, in light of everything that Michael said, and interest makes sense. Now, the real question, though, is, does that mean the Cubs are competing with the Yankees for his services?
I mean, how have the Yankees not already done it is really my question.
Yeah, I think that's where I struggle to see any logic to this whatsoever. But I mean, I could be wrong about what the Yankees are doing or any other club, but like if he's looking at even a reasonably priced 6-year deal from the Yankees, in what universe are the Cubs signing Cody Bellinger to a 6-year? It just doesn't.
No way.
It does not make any sense. Like everything Michael said about how Bellinger makes sense is way heavily weighted toward 26 and 27, kind of, especially when Bellinger's younger. It's not really a long-term need.
I agree.
Or thing. And you can kind of see that similarly with Kyle Tucker, although I understand the argument that the Cubs have Seiya and Ian Happ as free agents after this season. But it is, and we're not going to get into the other guys too much, it's just a lot easier for me to see how having Alex Bregman for 5 years or Bo Bichette for 7 years, whatever, it coordinates a little better with how I see the future of the Cubs, while making at least as much of an impact on near term. The other thing I don't love about the Cubs signing Kyle Tucker or Cody Bellinger is it would very likely result in most games featuring Seiya at DH and Moises Ballesteros not playing.
Let me be you and pause you for a second, and then maybe can be where we end, because I laid this out in the post and it was clarifying in a fun way for me. So I hope so. Which one of these three paths do you prefer? The Cubs make no move for a positional player, right? So they start the season with Matt Shaw at third, Horner at second, Suzuki in right, Ballesteros at DH, right? That's doing nothing. Okay.
Which is the likeliest, probably.
Right. Of course. They sign a free agent infielder, Bregman or Bichette, plays third, Horner at second, Suzuki in right, Ballesteros at DH. Shaw is in a super utility role for a year, or the Cubs do end up trading Nico Horner and Shaw plays second. I don't really see that happening, but in either case, that's that scenario. Or a free agent outfielder, Shaw at third, Horner at second, Bellinger or Tucker in right, Suzuki at DH, Ballesteros in Iowa. Yeah. Is the sort of thing. So does one of those paths intrigue you more than the others? Like, are you rather do no move than Bregman and Bichette? And I'm not saying like don't spend money. Like let's take this that part out of it. Like just like preference.
Yeah. Answering this as best we could, we kind of have to ignore contract projections. And I just look at the middle option there, where the Cubs are adding to the infield group. Feels like it improves the overall team more than sort of wedging an outfielder into this group that excludes Moises Ballesteros. Because in a lot of ways, what you're deciding between is, Bellinger relative to Bichette offense. Sure, you're deciding that, but you're also deciding Ballesteros in the lineup regularly or Shaw in the lineup regularly. I like them both long-term. I think they're both big league caliber players long-term, but you're really talking about the bat. And in 2026, at least, I'll bet on Moises Ballesteros to have the better offensive year than Matt Shaw, even if I believe Matt Shaw can take a step forward and be a positive bat in 26. Then you throw in the layer of looking long-term when you know that Nico Horner potentially is going to leave after this season. And internally, James Triantos had a huge step back last year. I'm not as confident that the Cubs have someone internally that the next year can immediately step up and take one of those two open infield spots. Whereas on the positional side, because first base is coordinating with outfield, is coordinating with DH, you have Mo, you have Kevin Alcantara, you have Jonathan Long, who we don't talk about enough. It just feels less useful to add to that group long-term as the infield group.
I will just respond that because Nico, Hap, and Suzuki are leaving in after 2026, and because Ballesteros is just turned 22 and has options, and Matt Shaw is young and can play super utility. I genuinely don't think I care which type of bat they will add, because I think no matter what, they're going to need another player after 2026. So it's like,
that's fair.
Get a little boost for this year. Maybe one of those guys ends up playing a bigger role because someone gets hurt or whatever. And then you have no problem in 2027 because you're going to need someone.
So really the answer is, and I imagine this is how the Cubs look at it, is whom do they like the best? Just set aside everything else. Just who do they think is going to project the best of the years ahead, and on whom can they get the best deal? Because let's be real on this. Yeah. The Cubs are not topping the market on any of these four guys at where the projections are. They are sitting back and saying, hey, if the right deal becomes available, we can accommodate any of these four. And I really think that's how this is proceeding. And so.
Yeah. And not to, it's too long of a discussion for the last few minutes of a pod, but like, I just wish things played out differently with Kyle Tucker. I wish last year was incredible from start to finish, and we loved him and he loved us, and an extension manifested, and it made sense because you can pretty easily see how he would fit, this team long-term, but it's just not our reality. It's just not the reality we're living in. I am having the most significant cognitive dissonance that I believe he's worth a $300 million contract, and don't think the Cubs are entirely wrong to not give it to him. Like it's so strange, but because how can I think that, right? It's like, how can I think part of it is because the complete lack of Kyle Tucker rumors or interest. I mean, we're talking about the top free agent by like a wide margin. No one gives a shit about right now. I mean, no one cares or is talking about a guy who was supposed to maybe get $400 million. Like that is consumed entire off seasons in the past. Mm-hmm. And so like, even that is giving me the ick. Like, I don't, as the kids say.
Well, Matt Clapp said something interesting on X about that concept, and especially us as Cubs fans, having experienced him so closely for a year, having seen the highest of highs, the lowest of lows, and detecting an inarticulable vibe, right, of the player, that when you're asking teams to commit $300 million to a like, you can't sign that deal without the guy being a face of the franchise. It doesn't work. Can you fathom him being the face of any franchise?
No, he won't be. I mean, look, it's not even, but like, look at PCA, like he just does it. He just oozes face of the franchise. Yeah. It's, and I guess I'm not saying this. I'll put words in your mouth. We're not saying this as like it's not as fun. It's like, it might be a literal financial component, a part of the calculus. That's like, this guy's not going to net as much return as the next guy, the first guy we give $300 million to, or $200 million. You know what I mean? Like there's some version of that where ticket sales, jersey sales, playoff expectations, whatever, just you can write off some of the costs because of that.
Put yourself in the shoes of the front office that's selling a $300 million Kyle Tucker deal to ownership, right? Because that would happen 30 teams. That's not a Cubs specific thing. And you've got to explain, okay, yeah, he missed huge chunks of the last 2 years. He was kind of a ghost down the stretch with the Cubs. They couldn't figure out what was going on with his calf. He left the team to go rehab at his home place. They gave him permission, whatever. But
there was that one strikeout in the 6th inning of Game 5 of the NLDS.
Yeah.
Never going to forget it.
Yeah, I know. He had his glory moment and didn't come through. No, but you're trying to sell this idea of like, but he's a superstar, right? It's just a hard sell because he, it's almost like after that Diamondbacks game in mid-April, did he ever feel like a superstar for the Cubs?
No,
Not even.
It's not even
close. And that's not even. I'm not even criticizing him because it's like, be you, do your thing. He's still a fantastic player that any team would want to have on their team. But that isn't the question in an offseason where you're a free agent and you're potentially seeking franchise changing money. Then you need to be a franchise changing player. And I'm just not sure he is.
Wait, but you know what's hilarious about that is the last organization in all of baseball that would be capable of would to not give someone extra money because they have those effects are the Cubs and Jed Hoyer.
Sure.
They would, you know what I mean? Because they would go like, well, it's only about the player on the field.
Yeah, I 100% agree, but there is something that's different between Dansby Swanson and Kyle Tucker. There is something,
that's true.
And I'd have to sit with that one for a long time to like articulate it because it isn't a criticism. It's not even an implicit criticism. It's just that there's something different about committing long-term to what you feel and see in that player versus I'm not saying I wouldn't do same money, like if Tucker won 170
yesterday. Are you kidding me?
So anyway, with Tucker, I think that's another one with the Cubs at most would be hanging around and saying like, look, if you need to settle for a 2-year deal,
I don't know why that keeps coming up, but it seems to be an increasingly discussed possibility that he's not going to get 8 years or whatever. He's going to take but I have an ad ops call in 2 minutes. So you need to wrap this up.
Sign up. So this is we pushed the limit. It was a big week though. Big week for the Cubs.
Yeah. Big week.
So this is the BN Cubs podcast. I'm Brett Taylor. That's newsbreaker Michael Cerami with the Cerami Bandy. Make sure you're following him everywhere. And you can also follow Bleacher Nation everywhere and read our stuff at the site. Thank you to Ankin Law, 312-6 million, Injury Law Made Personal, for putting this show on. And we'll talk to you guys again next week.